The night on Outpost 12 was quiet. The kind of quiet that made a man hear the ticking of the cooling pipes in the wall. Daniel sat alone in his small quarters. The low hum of the air recyclers filling the space. The room was plain of metal. Bunk, a narrow desk, a wall screen that had been stuck on the same channel for days. His hands were wrapped around a cup of lukewarm tea he had forgotten to drink. Outside, through the small circular window, the dark expanse of the alien planet stretched to the horizon. No lights, no signs of life, just a thin fog rolling over the ground, lit faintly by the pale moon. He had been stationed here for almost 3 months. It was supposed to be a routine watch, just keeping an eye on the supply lines that ran across this empty sector. But the days were long, the nights were longer, and the silence was the kind that got into a man's head. Daniel had started hearing things, sometimes a faint knock on the wall, or a whisper behind the air vents. He told himself it was nothing, just the old structure settling, just his mind playing tricks. Then the door to his quarters slid open without warning. Daniel turned, surprised. No one had keyed the access panel. No one should have been able to enter without clearance. A figure stepped inside. She was tall, wearing the dark matte armor of the alien liaison corps. The armor was scratched and dented, like it had seen weeks of travel through dangerous territory. A faint mist followed her in from the corridor, as if she carried the cold night with her. Daniel stood, confused. You can't just walk in here. Before he could finish, she spoke. I don't want to be alone tonight, she said softly. Her voice was low, calm, almost tired. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of truth she had carried all the way here. Daniel's confusion deepened. You're from the liaison corps. She nodded once, then reached up and began unclasping her armor. The shoulder plates came free with a dull click. The chest plate followed, revealing the lighter underlayer beneath. It wasn't a hurried movement. It wasn't meant to startle him. She moved like someone who had carried this armor for too long and was finally ready to set it down. Daniel stepped closer, though he didn't know why. You're not scheduled to be here. There's no shuttle arrival listed for today. I came by land, she replied, pulling the last piece of armor from her arm. The metal clanged softly as she set it on the floor. No records. No one knows I'm here. Her words carried weight. Out here. Traveling on foot through alien terrain at night was almost impossible. Something had driven her to it. Something strong enough to make her cross the distance in secret. Daniel's instincts told him to alert command. His training told him to demand identification. But something in her eyes, something cold and distant, told him this was not the time for protocol. You're safe here, Daniel said quietly, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether she could trust that promise. Then she stepped past him, placing her armor neatly by the wall. Safe, she repeated, almost like she was testing the word. Daniel noticed how she carried herself, not like someone fleeing danger in panic, but like someone who had made a choice, a deliberate choice to come here, to him. Do you have a name? He asked. Lyra, she said. But I don't use it much anymore. The way she said it made him think of someone who had left a life behind. Daniel motioned to the empty chair by the desk. You can sit. I'll get you something warm to drink. She didn't sit. She walked slowly to the window instead, looking out at the fog-covered plains. Her hand rested lightly on the metal frame. This place, she murmured, it's so quiet. It almost feels like the silence is alive. Daniel knew exactly what she meant. He handed her a cup of tea. She accepted it, her fingers brushing his for a moment. Her hands were cold, not just chilled from the night air, but the kind of cold that came from exhaustion, from being too far from safety for too long. You walked through the fog, Daniel said. Half question, half dash remarked. She nodded, sipping the tea. It doesn't bother me anymore. Daniel almost asked, what doesn't bother you anymore? But the way she avoided his gaze told him the answer might not be simple. Instead, he asked, why me? Why here? She took a slow breath, then looked at him for the first time since entering. Her eyes were sharp, yet there was something unsteady behind them. You were the only human left in this sector, she said. And there's something I need to tell you. But not tonight. Tonight, I just need to stay here. Daniel's heart was beating faster now. He didn't know why, but he felt as if something large, something that reached far beyond this small outpost had just stepped into his life with her arrival. Outside, the fog thickened, hiding the horizon. Inside, the room felt warmer now, though Daniel wasn't sure if it was because of the tea or the presence of the strange visitor who had walked into his quarters without permission for the first time in weeks. The silence didn't feel empty, it felt like it was waiting. The heater hummed in the corner, sending faint waves of warmth into the room. Lyra sat at the edge of Daniel's bunk now, her tea untouched on the desk. She had removed the rest of her outer gear and wore only the dark underlayer, a thin, flexible material used by travelers to keep warm and move easily. Daniel kept pacing slowly near the doorway, his mind full of questions. She had walked into his quarters unannounced. She had no transport record, no official orders, and now she was here, saying almost nothing. "Are you running from something?" he finally asked. She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the small round window. "I am not running. I already ran. Now I'm just far from where I started." Daniel frowned. "That sounds like running to me." "Not anymore," she said quietly. "Running means you still believe there's somewhere safe to reach. I don't believe that anymore." The words hung in the air. Daniel didn't know if they were meant for him or for herself. He leaned against the wall. "You said you came because I'm the only human left in this sector. What does that mean?" Lyra finally turned to face him. "You don't know what happened to the relay stations, do you?" "No," Daniel said. "Command hasn't sent me any reports for days. I thought it was just a comms issue." "It's not a comms issue," Lyra replied. "The relay stations are gone. All of them, burned from the inside." Daniel froze. The relay stations weren't just communication hubs, they kept supply lines safe, provided shelter, and monitored alien activity. Without them, the sector was blind. "Who did it?" Daniel asked. Lyra took a long breath before answering. "Not who." "What?" Daniel narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me this was some kind of natural event?" "No," she said. "Not natural, not human, and not like anything you've faced before." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Then what is it?" She shook her head. "You won't believe me until you see it." I didn't believe it either. Daniel wanted to press for details, but before he could speak again, a faint sound reached them. It was soft, almost like a whisper in the walls, but it carried a strange rhythm. Lyra's head turned sharply toward the door. "You hear that?" Daniel asked. "Yes," she said. "And if it's here already, you need to seal your quarters." Daniel moved quickly to the control panel, locking the door and activating the secondary barrier. The outpost walls were thick, but he knew sound could travel through strange ways out here. "What is it?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "It follows the fog," Lyra said. "It moves inside it. I have seen it pass by whole camps without a sound, only for those inside to vanish before morning." Daniel tried to reason with himself. Maybe it was just the wind through the vents, or a shifting panel outside. But Lyra's steady eyes told him she wasn't imagining it. She stepped closer to the window, wiping away a thin layer of condensation with her sleeve. "Look," she whispered. Daniel joined her. At first he saw nothing but the gray blanket of fog rolling over the barren ground. Then he noticed a darker shape moving within it, slow and deliberate. It was far, maybe 200 meters away, but its form was hard to focus on, like the fog itself was hiding it. "It doesn't like open light," Lyra said. "That's why I travel at night. The moons keep it away, but not for long." Daniel squinted. "How do you even know it's alive?" "Because it watches," she replied. "You will feel it soon enough." The shape paused. Daniel couldn't see any eyes, but suddenly he felt as if something on that plane was looking back at him. The hair on his arms rose. "Close the shutter," Lyra said sharply. Daniel obeyed, sealing the window. The room felt smaller instantly. They stood in silence for a moment before Daniel spoke again. "If this thing is following you, then you've brought it here." Lyra didn't argue. "I know. But if I hadn't come here, you'd still be alone, and you wouldn't know it was coming." Daniel took a deep breath. You're asking me to trust you. But I don't even know what your mission was before this. Her eyes dropped. My mission failed. I was supposed to deliver a message to the central colonies. A warning. The stations were my route, but they're gone now. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. In the warning, she looked up at him again. Her expression unreadable. That the fog is not natural. That it is a living thing. And it is learning. Daniel tried to process her words, but they sounded impossible. Learning what? How to open doors, she said. The heater clicked softly in the corner, and Daniel realized the humming sound from earlier was gone. That silence again, the kind that felt like it was listening. Lyra reached for her armor but didn't put it back on. She set it within reach instead, her body tense. It will test us first, she said. Maybe not tonight, but soon. Daniel glanced at the sealed door. If it tries to get in, we call command. We sound the alarms, and no, Lyra interrupted. By the time command responds, it will be too late. If you want to survive, you stay quiet, you stay warm, and you do not open that door for anything. Daniel felt his throat tighten, even if it sounds like someone we know, especially then. Lyra said outside, something brushed against the outer wall. It was light, so light that it could have been the wind, but both of them heard it, and both of them stayed still. Daniel's eyes met hers. She didn't have to say it, he already knew they were not alone anymore. The night dragged on without the usual hum of the outer vents. Daniel kept glancing at the small temperature gauge on the wall. The reading had begun to drop. Not by much, but enough to make him notice. Lyra sat near the window shutter, her armor at her side, her eyes closed as if she were resting. But Daniel knew she was not asleep. Every few minutes, she tilted her head slightly, listening. You said it will test us, Daniel whispered. What does that mean? She opened her eyes and looked at him. It means it will try small things. First, to see how we react, to learn our patterns. Daniel frowned. Patterns, it studies movement, sound, heat. If it can predict what we will do, it will know how to take us. A soft click echoed from the far side of the room. Daniel turned toward the sound. The desk light had gone out. He checked the power panel on the wall. All systems showed green. No reason for the light to fail. It has started, Lyra said quietly. Daniel tried to stay calm. It could be a wiring fault. Lyra stood and moved to the center of the room. In the fog, there are no faults. Everything that happens is part of the test. Before Daniel could reply, the air recycler gave a short, sharp hiss and stopped. The room fell into a heavy silence. Daniel's training kicked in. He went to the manual override and tried restarting it, but the panel did not respond. This is not possible, he muttered. We have backups for every system. It is not shutting them down, Lyra said. It is distracting you. Watch. She motioned for him to step back. Together, they stood still, listening. From somewhere in the corridor outside, a faint tapping began, slow, steady, like someone walking carefully down the metal hall. Daniel reached for the control to switch on the corridor camera, but the display screen showed only static. The tapping stopped right outside their door. Daniel felt his hand tighten into a fist. It cannot open the door, right? Lyra didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer to the door, stopping just short of touching it. Her breathing was quiet, controlled. Not yet, she said. The tapping started again, this time softer. Then a voice spoke. Daniel. It was his voice. Daniel's chest went cold. He had heard recordings of himself before, but this was different. The tone was flat, almost empty, as if someone had copied his voice but stripped away the human parts. Daniel, let me in. The voice said. He backed away from the door. That is not me. I told you. Lyra said, her voice firm. It will sound like someone we know, or someone we trust. You must not answer. The voice spoke again. I am cold, Daniel. The fog is too thick. Let me inside. Daniel's mind raced. It should not know my name. How does it? It learns, Lyra said. The moment you looked at it through the window, it learned your shape, your heat, your sound. And now it is trying to use them. The tapping came again. Then silence. Daniel held his breath, waiting. A loud metallic clang suddenly echoed from the far wall, making him flinch. The heater flickered off for a moment, then came back on at half strength. "It is mapping the room," Lyra said. "It is finding the weak points." Daniel checked the manual systems again, but every attempt to boost power failed. The outpost was still running, but parts of it seemed to be slipping under someone else's control. "You have dealt with this before," Daniel said. Lyra nodded slowly. "Once, on a smaller scale. My team and I thought we had destroyed it. But the fog is never gone. It waits. It changes." Daniel's voice dropped. "What happened to your team?" Her eyes darkened. It learned them. Before he could ask what she meant, the lights in the room flickered. A shadow moved across the far wall, not a human shadow, but something stretched and shifting, as if the fog itself had seeped through the metal. Daniel stepped back toward the corner. "How is that possible?" "The seals are tight." "It does not need to pass through gaps," Lyra said. "It passes through senses. If you look too long, it will know the shape of your thoughts." Daniel swallowed hard. "So what do we do?" "Stay unpredictable," Lyra said. "Do nothing in patterns. Keep moving, but not with rhythm. Do not speak unless necessary. Do not answer any voice that calls to you." The heater hummed lower and lower until the air in the room felt. Then Daniel's breath began to fog slightly. He wanted to tell himself that this was just a malfunction, that there was no such thing as a living fog, but the shadow on the wall lingered, moving as if it were alive, and the imitation of his own voice still echoed faintly in his mind. Then came a new sound, scraping metal, as if something outside was dragging its weight along the outpost wall. "It is circling us," Lyra said. Daniel forced his mind to stay clear. "How long does the test last?" "Until it knows enough to try the door," Lyra replied. The scraping faded. The silence returned, heavier than before. Daniel and Lyra exchanged a look. They knew it was not over. This was only the beginning. Daniel could feel the tension in the room growing heavier with each passing second. The shadows cast by the flickering lights seemed alive, moving independently of the objects they should have belonged to. Lyra stood near the center, her hands close to her armor, ready for anything. The silence was broken by a low, wet scraping sound against the outer door. It was deliberate and rhythmic, a slow testing of the barrier. "It is trying," Lyra whispered. "It wants to see how strong we are, how scared we can become." Daniel swallowed hard. He had trained for emergencies before, but nothing like this. His instinct screamed to open the door and confront whatever it was. But Lyra's warning echoed in his mind. He had to stay inside, no matter what. The scraping grew louder. Then came a voice, low, distorted, using Daniel's own tone. "Daniel, let me in. You know me. I am here." His heart raced. He clenched his fists. "It can't be me." He muttered. "It is using you," Lyra said calmly. "Don't answer it. Do not show fear. If you do, it will know your limits." The outer door shuddered as if something heavy leaned against it. Daniel's mind screamed to act, to fight, but he forced himself to step back and breathe evenly. Lyra's voice cut through his panic. "Remember what I told you? Stay unpredictable. Don't follow patterns. Move only when necessary." Daniel nodded, trying to steady himself. He could feel the presence of the fog, cold and calculating, moving outside, circling, waiting. Suddenly, the lights in the room went out completely. Daniel and Lyra were left in total darkness, except for the faint glow of the emergency panels. Daniel whispered, "Now what?" Lyra crouched, keeping herself as small as possible while still maintaining control. "Now, we wait, and we watch." A strange pressure filled the room, like the air itself had weight. Daniel could hear faint tapping again, this time coming from multiple directions, as if the fog had split into pieces outside the door. Then came the sound of metal bending. The door frame shivered, sending a vibration through the floor. Daniel froze. "It's going to break through." "It is testing," Lyra said. "If we panic, we lose. If we stay calm, it hesitates. That is why it uses fear first." The scraping stopped for a moment. Then, slowly, something pressed against the door again, heavier this time. The outer wall shook slightly. Daniel's teeth clenched. He could feel the pressure, the intelligence behind it, probing for weakness. You must listen carefully. Lyra said, it might try to imitate me next. It studies voices too. Daniel's pulse quickened. He had been hearing his own voice outside. Now the silence made him expect more. The door shuddered again, and a voice soft and familiar called out, Daniel, help me, I'm trapped. Daniel almost moved toward the door. It's Lyra's hand grabbed his arm. Do not respond. It is not real. He forced himself to step back. The voice repeated, now louder, more urgent. Daniel, I cannot breathe. Let me in. Daniel felt a wave of doubt wash over him. It sounded so human, so desperate. He wanted to trust it, but he knew Lyra was right. It is learning, she said. Every second you hesitate, it gains more knowledge. The door frame creaked again, and then something slammed against it with tremendous force. The shockwave knocked Daniel off balance. He stumbled against the desk. The teacup fell but did not break. Lyra caught him before he fell completely. Focus, she whispered. It only has power outside. We are inside. Daniel looked at her. Her calmness surprised him, even now, when the building shook. When the fog pressed against the walls like a living entity, she did not panic. She was a constant. The door gave one final shudder, and the tapping stopped. Silence returned. The air felt less heavy, though Daniel knew it had not gone away. Lyra straightened. That was the first test. It wanted to see if we would panic. We passed. We are still inside. We are still human. Daniel exhaled slowly. That was too close. You almost gave it what it wanted, Lyra said. Do not forget, every instinct it triggers is a test. Every voice, every movement, it counts. It learns faster than you can think. Daniel nodded, understanding fully for the first time that they were in a battle of minds. The fog was not just an environmental hazard. It was intelligent, patient, and relentless. Why me? Daniel asked. Why did it even come after this outpost? Lyra studied him for a moment. Because you are human. It has studied other species before, and humans are different. It cannot fully understand us yet. That is why it is dangerous. That is why it wants to learn from us. Daniel felt a mix of fear and awe. Humans had survived countless dangers, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. A low hum began from the corridor outside. Daniel and Lyra turned toward it. The fog was moving again, but this time it sounded almost like wind through metal. Soft but insistent. Stay close. Lyra said, the next test will come quickly. It will try more than sound. It may try to show you things you know or things you fear. Do not react. Stay calm. Daniel watched her carefully. Every movement she made was deliberate, measured, and unafraid. He knew that her calmness was their strongest weapon right now. For a few minutes, the room remained still. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. The fog outside seemed to pause, almost waiting. Then, from somewhere deep in the corridor, a new sound came like a scratching on the metal floor, but moving toward them slowly. Daniel tightened his fists, ready to follow Lyra's lead. The first real attempt to breach the outpost had begun, and they would need every ounce of human instinct, courage, and cleverness to survive it. The fog had grown heavier outside, pressing against the outpost walls as if it wanted to bend the metal. Daniel stood near the center of the room, keeping a careful distance from the sealed door. Lyra crouched close to the window, her eyes scanning. The mist beyond. It is testing our patience now, she said quietly. It knows we are alive. It wants more than to push the door. It wants to see how we think. Daniel nodded, trying to stay calm, but the tension was almost unbearable. The low humming of the outpost systems, mixed with the faint sound of scraping from the corridor outside. He could feel the fog moving in subtle waves, brushing against the walls, changing the air pressure slightly. A sudden noise made both of them freeze. Something hit the outer wall hard, leaving a deep vibration that ran through the floor. Daniel's heart jumped. It is learning faster than I thought, Lyra said. We have to act now. She stood and moved toward the storage locker, her hands opening it slowly. Daniel followed, wondering what she intended. Lyra pulled out a small container of reflective panels and a few portable lights. She set them carefully along the walls, angling them toward the outer door. "What are those for?" Daniel asked. "To confuse it," Lyra replied. "It reacts to light and movement patterns. If we disrupt its expectation, it cannot predict us as easily." Daniel nodded and helped her adjust the panels. The lights flickered on, casting bright beams across the room. Shadows bounced against the walls, creating shapes that shifted constantly. The scraping sound outside grew louder. Then the distorted voice spoke again, calling Daniel's name, pleading, coaxing him to open the door. He shook his head. "I won't." "Respond good," Lyra said. "It wants you to doubt yourself. Keep your mind sharp." Another hit against the door came, harder this time. The door frame bent slightly, testing the strength of the seal. Daniel and Lyra exchanged a glance, understanding that the fog was becoming bolder. Lyra adjusted one of the reflective panels. "It is learning our layout. It is trying to predict where we will move next. You must not stay still for too long. Move slowly, unpredictably." Daniel obeyed. He paced in small, irregular steps, keeping his body tense but controlled. Every movement had a purpose. He noticed the fog outside seemed to hesitate, almost as if it was watching, trying to calculate. His path dot suddenly. A shadow slipped across the far wall. It was darker than any other shadow in the room. Daniel froze. Lyra motioned for him to keep moving. He obeyed, though his heart raced. "It is testing our fear," Lyra whispered. "Do not let it succeed." The voice called again, this time, imitating Lyra. "Daniel, I need your help. She is trapped. Open the door." Daniel turned sharply to Lyra. "It is pretending to be you." Lyra nodded. "Exactly. It wants to trick you. Ignore it. You have to trust me completely." Daniel forced himself to focus. He could feel his pulse in his ears, hear the faint shift of air as the fog moved closer. He kept moving, not in patterns, keeping his attention on the reflective lights bouncing around the room. Another heavy hit shook the door. Daniel stumbled slightly. Lyra caught him and steadied him. "We must act together. If it sees cooperation, it can predict us better. Move carefully, but separately. Keep it guessing." Daniel followed her instructions. They moved slowly across the room, each taking different paths, each keeping the other in view without showing exactly what they would do next. The fog outside seemed to hesitate, reacting to their unpredictability. Then came a sound unlike anything Daniel had heard before, a scraping mixed with whispers, the air vibrating slightly. The fog was no longer just pressing against the walls. It was attempting to infiltrate the room through the smallest spaces, as if it were learning how to manipulate matter itself. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "It is stronger than I imagined. It learns from patience and observation." Lyra said, "Do not panic. That is its advantage. Stay calm, and it cannot control us yet." The shadow on the wall stretched suddenly, forming a shape that resembled a human figure. Daniel flinched but did not move toward it. Lyra's voice remained calm. "It is copying fear now. Watch carefully." Daniel observed the figure. It was not solid. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, but it carried an eerie intelligence. He realized the fog was testing their reactions, analyzing their hesitation and their reflexes. A new hit struck the door. The outer wall bent slightly, as if something tried to push through. Daniel steadied himself, gripping the edge of a table. The fog's presence felt suffocating, as though it filled every corner of the room. Lyra moved to a small panel on the wall and activated a secondary sensor system. The display flickered, showing distorted shapes outside the door. The fog was moving, wrapping around itself, creating multiple shadowed figures. "It is preparing for the next step," Lyra said. "We must be ready to act, but not predictable. Follow my instructions." Daniel nodded. His fear had not vanished, but he felt a new determination. He realized that if they worked together, following reason over instinct, they could withstand the fog's tests. The fog pressed harder against the door. Another distorted voice called, using a combination of Daniel's and Lyra's tones. It sounded almost real, almost human. But both of them knew it was not. Daniel focused on the lights and reflective panels. He moved in a pattern that changed constantly, walking, crouching, turning, never pausing for more than a few seconds. Lyra mirrored the behavior, but from a different angle. The fog seemed to hesitate. Its pressure on the door softened slightly. As if confused by their unpredictability, Lyra whispered, "See? It cannot predict both of us at the same time. We are still in control." Daniel exhaled, relief mixing with tension. He understood now that the fog's power depended not only on its strength but on its ability to anticipate behavior. By staying unpredictable and calm, they had gained an advantage. A final hit against the door rattled the metal, but it did not break. The fog seemed to withdraw slightly, pressing against the walls but not pushing further. The room's lights flickered back to full power, and the emergency system stabilized. Daniel turned to Lyra. "We survived the first real challenge, but it will come again, stronger and smarter." Lyra nodded. "Yes, but we learned its methods. We learn how it observes. That knowledge is more powerful than brute force." Daniel realized for the first time that their survival depended not on weapons or walls, but on human intelligence, courage, and cooperation. The fog could adapt, but humans could think, improvise, and feel in ways it could not fully understand yet. The first test had ended. The next challenge was coming, and they would need every ounce of their skill and every piece of courage to survive it. The fog outside had paused, but its presence was undeniable. It pressed against the walls, moved in faint currents across the floor, and carried with it an unsettling intelligence. Daniel and Lyra had survived the first attack, but both knew that this was only the beginning. Daniel studied the reflective panels and portable lights they had arranged. They had worked to confuse the fog, but only temporarily. It had tested them, measured their responses, and now it would adjust. "We need more than lights and mirrors," Daniel said quietly. "It is learning to quickly." Lyra nodded. "Yes, it adapts to simple tricks, but humans can improvise in ways it cannot. We need to think several steps ahead." Daniel looked around the room. The bunk, the desk, the storage lockers, even the metal walls themselves, all could become tools. He began moving panels to create a maze of light and shadow, forcing the fog to navigate unpredictably. Lyra followed, adjusting angles and repositioning lights. "The goal is not to trap it," Lyra explained. "We cannot hold it forever. We want to delay it, to confuse it, to force it to react to us, not the other way around." Daniel nodded, a sense of clarity settling in. They were not just defending themselves. They were teaching the fog to underestimate humans. A faint tapping came from the door, then a distorted voice. It tried to mimic Daniel again. "Daniel, I'm cold. Open the door." Daniel ignored it, focusing instead on the maze of light. He moved slowly, unpredictably, making small adjustments to the panels. The shadows on the walls shifted, creating illusions of movement in multiple directions. "It is analyzing us," Lyra said. "Every light, every shadow, every movement. If we keep changing patterns, it cannot predict us accurately." Daniel felt a surge of determination. Humans had survived countless threats, both natural and alien, by thinking, adapting, and cooperating. This fog was clever, but so were they. He noticed that some of the shadows were flickering differently than expected. The fog was trying to imitate movement, to anticipate their steps. "Watch closely," Lyra said. "It is mimicking us now. If it copies our actions, it reveals its position." Daniel studied the flickering shadows and realized she was right. A darker, irregular shadow moved slightly out of sync with the rest. It must be part of the fog trying to test them directly. He grabbed a portable light and adjusted it, shining directly on the irregular shadow. The shadow shifted suddenly, revealing its form an amorphous mass that pulsed slightly, dark gray against the lighter reflections. "It is reacting," Daniel said, amazed. "We can control its movement with light and shadow." Lyra smiled. Faintly, "Yes, that is why humans are dangerous. We observe, we plan, we adapt. It cannot fully predict ingenuity." They spent the next minutes carefully coordinating movements. Daniel and Lyra shifted lights, repositioned panels, and moved themselves unpredictably. Each time the fog tried to copy or anticipate, it was forced to change, revealing its structure and limitations. Then came a new sound of scraping from the ceiling. The fog was no longer only at the walls. It tried to find new ways to reach them. Learning to navigate three-dimensional space. Daniel, focus, Lyra said. We need to make it choose. Divide its attention. He nodded. They set up a path of lights from floor to ceiling, creating vertical shadows and angles that forced the fog to split its attention. Every time it shifted toward one point, the other lights and panels forced it to react differently. The fog pulsed and writhed, testing them. But Daniel noticed its reaction slowing. It could no longer anticipate every movement. It was clever, but it had limits. We can do this, Daniel said, his voice steady now. We can outthink it. Lyra nodded. Humans are not just strong or fast. We think. We adapt. That is our advantage. Suddenly, a distorted voice came from the corner, mimicking Lyra. Daniel, I need your help. She is trapped. Open the door. Daniel froze for a moment. Then he remembered her advice. Do not react to fear or manipulation. He looked at Lyra, and she gave a slight nod. He ignored the voice and adjusted the panels again. Shadows shifted, lights reflected off the metal surfaces, and the fog pulsed, seemingly frustrated. It is learning, Daniel said, but it is learning slowly, not fast enough to control us completely. Lyra stepped closer to him. We need to prepare for its next move. It will try more aggressive actions now, but if we keep improvising, it cannot succeed. Daniel thought quickly. They could not stay passive. The fog might test patience, but humans could take initiative. He grabbed a metal rod from the storage locker and tapped it against the floor, creating vibrations in unpredictable patterns. The fog reacted immediately, pulsating toward the new vibrations. Daniel and Lyra shifted their positions again, forcing the fog to divide its focus between lights, shadows, and vibrations. It is overloading, Lyra said. It cannot adapt to everything at once. Daniel realized they had found a strategy. By using multiple stimuli, light, shadow, sound, and movement, they could confuse the fog and prevent it from learning fully. A faint smile appeared on his face. We can fight back without opening the door. We can win by outhinking it, Lyra nodded, her confidence now evident. Exactly. Humans do not rely on a single method. We combine, we adapt, we improvise. That is why it cannot defeat us easily. The fog pulsed again, pressing against the walls, but the vibrations, lights, and shadows forced it to withdraw slightly. The distorted voices grew quieter. As if it was recalculating its approach, Daniel realized that humans were not just survivors. They were innovators. Even when faced with a being that could mimic voices, read patterns, and manipulate its environment, they could still take advantage of creativity and teamwork. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. This is just the beginning, but now we know. We can challenge it. We can control how it learns about us, and that knowledge is power. Daniel took a deep breath. For the first time since the fog had arrived, he felt hope. The outpost was not just a shelter anymore, it was a testing ground, where humans could prove their ingenuity against an intelligence unlike any they had faced. The fog outside pressed against the walls one final time before seeming to retreat slightly. Daniel and Lyra stood together, surveying the room. They were exhausted, but they had learned something essential. Humans could think, adapt, and survive even in the most unpredictable and dangerous situations. And the fog, as intelligent as it was, could not predict the full depth of human creativity. The fog had gathered outside the outpost, thick and gray, like a living cloud pressing against the walls. Daniel and Lyra stood together, ready for the final phase of its challenge. They had survived the first tests, discovered its patterns, and learned how to confuse it. Now it was time to act decisively. We need to finish this, Lyra said. It has learned some of our reactions, but if we keep improvising, it cannot fully predict us. That is our advantage. Daniel nodded. He had never felt more alert, more focused. His fear from earlier had transformed into determination. They would not let the fog dominate them. Lyra adjusted the reflective panels again, angling the lights toward the door and the corners of the room. Shadows shifted in complex patterns, confusing any attempt at imitation. Daniel tapped a metal rod against the floor, creating irregular vibrations. Every few steps, he changed direction, never repeating a pattern. "It is reacting," Daniel whispered. "I can see it trying to split itself to handle both lights and vibrations." "Yes," Lyra replied. "We need to force it to make mistakes. If it miscalculates even once, we can gain control." The distorted voices began again, calling their names, pleading, whispering fears. Daniel felt a momentary urge to respond, to check the door, but he remembered Lyra's words. Humans had control over actions, even when fear tried to take over. Focus on what you can control. Lyra said, "Ignore the rest." Daniel tightened his jaw and moved deliberately. Lyra mirrored his movements, but from a different angle. They were creating unpredictability not just with lights and vibrations, but with their own motion. The fog pulsed harder, pressing against the walls as if trying to reach them with sheer force. Daniel watched its shape shift in the shadows. He could see the edges of its mass faltering. Unable to adapt to the multiple stimuli, "It is overextending," he said. "We can push it back." Lyra nodded. "We cannot destroy it entirely, but we can reclaim our space. We can show that humans are not easy to manipulate." Daniel glanced around and saw an opportunity. He picked up a small, portable sensor from the table and positioned it near the door. Its purpose was simple: emit high-frequency pulses that could disrupt the fog's ability to sense vibrations and movement precisely. "Ready?" he asked. Lyra looked at him with calm determination. "Yes." Now, he activated the sensor. A sharp pulse filled the room. The fog immediately reacted, pulsing irregularly and recoiling slightly from the new interference. The distorted voices faltered, broken, unable to mimic anything correctly. "It works," Daniel said. "It cannot anticipate both us and the sensor." Lyra adjusted the lights again, forcing more shadows across the walls. They moved in coordinated, unpredictable steps, each one forcing the fog to split attention. Every pulse, every shadow, every vibration created a complex web that the fog could not control. The fog's presence weakened, the outer wall shook less, the strange whispers diminished, and the heavy pressure in the air lightened. Daniel felt relief. But he knew this was not a victory yet. The fog was clever. It could adapt if given time. "Keep moving," Lyra said. "Do not stop until it retreats." Daniel obeyed. He changed direction, then crouched, then pivoted around a table, keeping his motions irregular. Lyra did the same. Together, they created a confusing pattern of motion, light, and vibration. The fog pulsed again, but this time it faltered. It could no longer predict the human responses. Shadows flickered unpredictably, vibrations scattered in irregular sequences, and lights reflected in multiple angles. Daniel felt a surge of hope. "It is withdrawing," he whispered. "Yes," Lyra said. "It realizes we are unpredictable. That is why it cannot control humans fully." The distorted voices vanished completely. The tapping on the door stopped. The heavy presence lifted slightly, leaving only a faint gray mist beyond the reinforced walls. Daniel exhaled deeply. "We did it. We survived its tests." Lyra smiled. Faintly, "We did more than survive. We showed it human intelligence is more than simple patterns. That is what makes humans dangerous to anything that relies only on observation and prediction." Daniel felt a sense of pride. Humans were small, fragile creatures compared to many threats in the galaxy, but their minds were powerful. Ingenuity, adaptation, and cooperation could overcome even the most intelligent adversaries. "Will it come back?" he asked. "Perhaps," Lyra said. "It will always learn. But now it knows humans are not easy prey. That knowledge may protect other outposts, other humans." Daniel nodded. He realized the experience had changed him. He was no longer just a survivor of circumstances. He had become a participant in a battle of minds. The fog had tested them, but they had learned how to think faster, act smarter, and use every resource available. Lyra moved to the window and peered outside. The fog still lingered, but it seemed hesitant. Its pulses were slow, irregular, as if it were considering its next move. Daniel stood beside her. "What do we do now?" We wait for command to arrive, Lyra said. They will want a report. But more importantly, we observe. Humans can always learn. And if the fog returns, we will be ready. Daniel glanced at the reinforced door, the reflective panels, the portable lights, and the sensor. Everything they had used was simple technology, simple principles. But combined with human thought and adaptability, it had defeated a creature that relied on instinct and learning alone. I never thought we could outthink it. Daniel said quietly. Lyra smiled. That is the human advantage. We are small, but we are clever. We survive by thinking, not just by reacting. Daniel felt the warmth in his chest. He realized that humans, no matter how alone or outnumbered, carried a spark of intelligence and courage that could face even the strangest and most dangerous challenges outside. The fog hovered silently. It had not vanished, but it had retreated, respecting the humans who had faced it and outsmarted it. Daniel and Lyra stood together, watching it, knowing that this night had proven something essential. Humans could survive and even triumph when they relied on ingenuity, courage, and cooperation. For the first time since the fog had arrived, Daniel felt calm. He understood that fear was temporary, but knowledge and strategy were lasting weapons. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. We are not just survivors. We are humans. That is why we win. Daniel nodded. He looked around the outpost, at the lights, the panels, and the careful patterns of movement and vibration they had created. It was more than defense. It was proof of human skill and intelligence. And as the gray mist hovered beyond the reinforced walls, hesitant and cautious, Daniel knew that humans, even when isolated, could face unknown dangers and emerge victorious. They were small, but they were clever. They were vulnerable, but they were unstoppable in thought and spirit. The night ended with quiet, but the lesson remained. Human ingenuity was the greatest weapon against any challenge, even one as strange and dangerous as a living, learning. Daniel and Lyra exchanged a look of understanding. They had faced the unknown and triumphed. And in that triumph, they had discovered the true power of humanity.